Welcome back, All Sports Western New York. My old buddy, the hockey man, Steve Manson, in studio. Steve, let's cut right to the chase. Your take on the Pat LaFontaine situation.
Well, first of all, I don't buy the Sabres explanation. I mean, had Pat LaFontaine wanted to go back to New York and work for the NHL and move his family back and everything, there's only 5 weeks to go in the season. They would have certainly waited to the end of the year, had a nice, giant, big press conference, thanked him for his service, like you said, and just, moved on. Pat's never shied away from publicity and press conferences before. And you most certainly wouldn't have done it 4 days before the trade deadline when everything else is swirling down there, including the big trade the night before. I don't believe the trade had anything to do with this. Like I said, I don't buy the Sabres explanation or Pat's official release saying that that's what. Yeah, obviously, in that building down there, you have Bagula people, you have Regeer people who are still there, you have Craig Patrick, you have Tim Murray, and you had Pat LaFontaine. You still had all the scouts from the Regeer. I mean, you've got a mix down there that's had to all come together, and obviously it didn't.
No, and what I'm starting to hear from inside the organization, and I'm not saying it's an orchestrated attempt, but some of the stories that come out, there's a lot pointing at Pat's emotional state and how tough he was to deal with, which I take with a grain of salt only because he's now gone back to the NHL. He was working within the NHL.
Right.
So whatever that emotional state is, it hasn't given the NHL officers concern as he works there amongst their people.
Well, there's no question. Pat LaFontaine, he had this presence on television, and all the fans here, they love him, and he's, charity, and this is all true. But behind scenes, he's a tough guy. Well, you know what? This organization needed a tough guy. They needed to have some butts kicked down there. They needed to have some people held accountable for what's going on. And here, Pat brought in Ted Nolan. He brought in Tim Murray. I think 2 excellent hires. And I think it was, in my opinion, it was a situation where he just didn't click well with the people who were already there above him. And
yet, Steve, you're talking about a man in Terry Pegula who sat by as Darcy Regeer brought this team from a playoff team to a last-place NHL hockey team. And that's what happened over 3 years. I mean, hockey heaven has become hockey hell. And he sat by and he allowed Regeer to do that until his hand was forced, and he brings in Pat LaFontaine. But after 3 years of Regeer, just 3 months of LaFontaine, and he's gone?
You make an excellent point, and that's something I want to point out. The same advisors that he has surrounding him are the ones that advised him to keep Darcy Regeer,
right.
Are the ones that advised him to give Regeer an extension just a little bit over a year ago, are the ones that advised him to keep Regeer at the end of last year, in my opinion, when he should have been fired. And these are the same people he's listening to?
If you like that, you're going to love this.
Okay.
Because I was talking today to John DeShulo. Now, John DeShulo, you remember, John DeShulo, and he does Political Buzz. He worked at WBBZ-TV for 31 years, and I worked there back in the 80s. So the people that have come in from the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are basically who Ken Sawyer and these guys are.
Right.
And they've all gotten, fat resumes because the Penguins won the Cup. Why'd they win the Cup? Because of Mario Lemieux. And Mario Lemieux then saved the team from bankruptcy.
Yep.
So having that on the resume is like being a news director when Irv Weinstein was the main anchor at Channel 7. You're going to get carried along on the coattails.
Exactly.
So how much these guys actually know, how much of a genius they are, time will tell. But you've seen the track record.
Yeah.
This team is the worst team in the NHL, despite Ted Nolan getting them to play above their heads.
Absolutely. And now I'm concerned about the Ted Nolan situation.
What about Ted Nolan? You think he'll take the deal?
Well, yes, I do. I think he will. But I'm sure Ted is looking. This is all like Back to the Future. You and I are two of the guys, media-wise, that were around way back when. There's only a handful of us.
Right.
And Ted went through this whole thing before. And I've heard people say that this is the worst the Sabres ever been. Guys, this doesn't even hold a candle. That thing went on for almost a year with
Muckler.
Well, first of all, it started off with Moss and Quinn, and then Muckler and Nolan and your favorite Jennifer Smith.
I like Jennifer.
And that thing went on for almost a year. This happened over a weekend or over a couple of weeks. But the fact is, if Teddy takes the contract, which I think he should, okay, he's here to be the coach. But next year when this team's god awful again, who's going to get the blame and who's going to get tossed out, walk the plank? It's going to be the coach. Now that somebody else. And I'm sure Teddy's weighing that against, he wants to be the coach of this team. I mean, it was his greatest thrill was to get a chance to come back here. And now he's having to relive this whole thing again.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing, just like it was back in the old days, I'm hearing these little rumors, well, maybe Teddy's not that great a coach, and Teddy's not this, and Teddy's not that. Well, guess what? We want to go back to Ralston because Ralston was the coach when Regier was the general manager, which was kept on by the Pegula people.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, I bristle too. I earlier we showed the column I wrote today because I bristle at people who say that Nolan is a motivator but not an X's and O's guy.
Right.
Apparently the X's and O's against Team Canada in the Olympics were good enough to scare the hell out of the entire country that Latvia was going to upset them in that game. But you got some of the younger people, and I will say that some of the younger talk show hosts in this town.
well, I know exactly who you're talking about.
They make reference to the
Yep.
fact, forget about
Yeah.
who's the top guy,
Yeah.
worry about who the players are on the ice. And I compare that to sitting in the back seat of a luxury car and you got an unlicensed driver at the wheel not knowing what the controls are. It's not going to work out
No.
for you. Who runs the show, who makes the calls, is we've seen in this town with the Bill Polians, with the John Butlers. When you have the right guy in place, it shows on the field of competition.
Yeah.
And what's going on in the Sabres organization right now is a dysfunction that you're right. For some reason, this franchise has reeked in this for the last 30 years. And I don't know what
With
the
different
reason is.
owners.
Different
Owners, different GMs.
You know who's going to write a best-selling book? Mike Gilbert, the PR guy for the Buffalo Sabres. Because Mike Gilbert has been there
Yes,
through
he
the
has.
Muckler, Moss, Quinn, Nolan incident, through the Adelphia Rigas bankruptcy, through the Golisano Quinn ownership, and now the Pegula ownership.
I know it.
Mike Gilbert's going to write either the sequel to Slapshot 40 years later or a bestseller.
Well, you know what? I was born and raised in this town. And I'm going to include the Bills in this. The fans in this town deserve better. They deserve better. They go out and they support their teams. And we've gone through all this stuff with the Bills over the years. And all this stuff with the Sabres. It's just one more thing. Just one more slap in the face. LaFontaine is a beloved person in this town. If it wasn't working, well, come out and tell us the truth.
Right.
Don't give us this, he wanted to go back to New York, and then you find out he had to sign a document, non-disclosure document. Well, if you want to go back to be with your family and back in New York, you don't sign a
there's no truth to
non-disclosure.
that.
I mean,
There's no truth to
it's
that.
ridiculous.
Now, let me say this. I still know a lot of people in that building. Everybody loves Terry and Kim Pegula.
Yeah.
They're extremely generous. They're kind-hearted people, which begs the question, why did it end this way with a guy that is also beloved in this community? Just strikes a very sour note.
Yeah, and who has an answer for it? I don't have an answer for that. When Pegula bought the team, I was thrilled, like everybody else. You know who would have had the story you and I talked about yesterday? The late Jim Kelly.
The late, great Jim Kelly.
He obviously worked for you at Empire. He did for me at Western New York Hockey Magazine, and he would have been on top of all this thing. I don't know who's going to break the
No,
final.
but I tell you, Bucky Gleason Gleason and Mike Harrington are doing very good jobs right now of getting what truth there is out.
Yeah.
Because it's.
But nobody's going to talk.
People
That's
are
the whole
sworn
bit.
to secrecy.
And it's
yeah.
going to be, it's going to leak out, and it's going to do this. They should have just had a press conference and said, "Hey, it's not working."
Steve, we're out of time. Real quick plug for your website.
WNY Hockey Now, NOW.com, and we run more stories.
Which you boldly claim you run more hockey stories than anywhere else in America.
No, I didn't. I said we run more hockey stories than everybody else in Western New York.
Oh, Western New York. Okay. Who's going to
Combined.
count? Who's going to count? Steve, thanks for being on. When we come back, we're going to be talking college hoops with Bob DeCesare right after this.